Well, welcome everybody for attending the webinar on community well-being and quality of life with a focus on Indiana. My name is Tammy Baxter. I'm the Executive Director of the Community Development Society. This webinar is a collaboration between the Community Development Society, Community and Wellbeing Learning Collaborative at Purdue University's John Martinson Honors College, Purdue University Center for Rural Research, Education, and Outreach, the North Central Regional Center for Rural Development, and the International Society for Quality of Life Studies. For today's webinar, there will be 3 presentations, and we are hoping to have time for audience questions and dialogue. So we do have the chat open. If you have questions throughout, we are hoping to get to them at the end, and we'll have the panelists answer. If you do have questions, please put them in the chat. First, Dr. Hossein Mousazadeh will speak about community quality of life, newcomers, and rural health. Dr. Hossein Mousazadeh is a postdoctoral research assistant for the Community and Wellbeing Learning Collaborative at Purdue University's John Martinson Honors College. That is a tongue twister, Hossein. Specializing in community development, tourism management, happiness and well-being, and sustainable development. Dr. Mousazadeh is also a research fellow at the International Society for Quality of Life Studies. Driven by a profound passion for academia, he has amassed a comprehensive research portfolio spanning diverse domains with a fervent commitment to creating a positive impact and fostering community development. He is deeply committed to pioneering innovative solutions that promote sustainability and enhance the quality of life and well-being. Welcome, Hossein.
Thank you so much.
Second, Dr. Susanna Bednarik and Dr. Michael Wilcox Jr. will discuss NCRCRD's 2024 dataset on rural-urban Indiana quality of life and compare select findings to their 2022 dataset. Dr. Bednarik works at the North Central Regional Center for Rural Development and conducts applied research in the broad areas of rural social and economic development. Her current research focuses on rural and regional development, including internal migration, subjective well-being, small entrepreneurship, and regional data availability and needs. Dr. Wilcox Jr. serves as Purdue Extension's Assistant Director for Community Development, Associate Director for NCRCRD, and a Community Economic Specialist. He guides innovative extension programs addressing Indiana communities' diverse needs while co-leading regional initiatives in leadership, community resiliency, and health. His work integrates economic, environmental, and social sustainability dimensions, focusing on entrepreneurship, placemaking, and community capacity building in a domestic and international context. Third, on the presentations is Esmeralda Cruz. She will be talking about immigration in Indiana and the policy implications with community well-being and quality of life. Esmeralda received her master's degree from Purdue University in Youth Development and Education. She was the Health and Human Sciences educator for Purdue Extension. In Clinton County from 2014 to 2023, she helped establish and organize several important initiatives. In 2024, she transitioned to a new position within Purdue Extension as the Hispanic Latino Community Engagement Specialist, where her primary objectives are to spearhead engagement initiatives across the state, tailored to the Hispanic Latino community, and collaborate closely with state and local partners to coordinate events and efforts that raise awareness and respond to the distinct challenges and interests of this demographic. Through these conversations on both academic and applied work, attendees will gain a deeper understanding of both the context and lived experiences of community members, their well-being, and quality of life living in Indiana. Well, my introduction is over, and I welcome all of you panelists. Thank you so much for being here. And without further ado, Dr. Hossein Mousazadeh, the floor is yours for the first presentation.
Yeah, hello. Thank you so much, Tammy. I really appreciate to give me our opportunity to discuss our result from Purdue University, and again say hi to all of the participants around the world. I believe is it morning? Good morning. Is afternoon? Is afternoon? Good afternoon. I'm here to. I believe I can share my screen. Share. Tammy, could you please confirm you can
It's
see my
working.
screen?
It's
Yeah. Okay.
working. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you so much again. My name is Hossein Mousazadeh. I'm a postdoctoral researcher in Purdue, John Martinson Honors College, and recently I awarded for research fellow from International Society for Quality of Life for 2025. And I'm here to present our recent result from community quality of life and the newcomers as a branding gap in Indiana state rural well-being. This is a part of our research we submit to NIH and also working with the internal grant in Purdue. And just for clarify that as a newcomers is the aging who move from urban area to rural areas. We just put it as a migration, but it's kind of confusing for reviewer. That's why we change it to newcomers. As an introduction, the rural aging trend is a growing concern in the not just for Indiana, even for all in the whole country in the United States. The United States is experiencing significant demographic shift with older adults representing rapidly growing segment of the population. This trend is particularly in rural areas where limited healthcare infrastructures and also community service and the persistence of health and there is a very many of the problem for access for the health centers in rural areas, and even for the recent USDA report it highlights that the aging baby boomer generation led to the significant rise in the rural elderly population during 2010 and early 2020, especially when the COVID-19 started. Many of the older adults moved from the urban area to non-metro. I'm saying non-metro area because of here in this presentation, I use many times non-metro area as a rural areas and the suburban areas. Even about that again, there was in the rural Indiana faced a significant challenges in the sustaining community well-being amidst the social, economic, health, environment, and also resilience and overall quality of life, which we call community quality of life in this presentation. Here is a map to percent of the population age 65 and in the United States. If you can see like you can see many of the counties and many of the states. They are not all of them, but most of them. Some of them are in 55% of the population who are more than 65 age. Again, here another map is showing the non-metro older age counties in the 2023. Again, you will see there is a lot of like non-metro areas in the United States. They are older age from based on the last report in 2023. And again, here is a changing in the home healthcare establishment for the non-metro counties in 2010 to 2023. So this was kind of introduction. I'm going to discuss about the what is the gap? What is the gap in rural areas in Indiana? The failing of the address the unique needs of the growing demographic could lead a significant challenges for the healthcare outcome and well-being in rural city. The increasing the trend of older adults, which I mentioned earlier, there is a huge migration from urban to non-metro areas, especially in 2010 and 2020. It's made a lot of the problem. You know, when somebody living in the urban areas, they don't have any problem to, you know, just an example for transportation, which is a factor for community quality of life. Again, for the health centers, when they move to rural areas, there's a lot of problem will come to them because they adopted their bodies, their mind, they adopted to urban areas. They can access very easy for transportation, very easy for health centers. But when they move to the rural areas, they face a lot of the problem. That's why we believe there is a gap in rural areas, especially for Indiana. There are the lack of the intervention of the identity, health, and the social integration challenges and the barriers in aging newcomers, which who move from urban to rural areas. There is no universally accepted for a centralized model for the community quality of life that showing the address the unique characteristics and the challenges for rural communities, particularly in the aging newcomers in rural areas. There is a model for Professor Sergi, who is my mentor even for my NIH program. He have a like community quality of life indicators using in urban areas. I just adopted some of the factors you will see in the next slide. We just change some of the adopted and the change of the factors from Professor Sergi's model to be useful for rural areas. As an Indiana, the Hossein state is the second worst state for quality of life. Is ranked for 41 in healthcare as a when they are coming for 78 of the factors there and sorry, yeah, 78 of the factors from 200 325 total point in the category for quality of life. Here is the Indiana is the 35 in the nation in overall health based on the American Health Ranking Report in 2022. 43 ranked when it comes to access to mental health care. Again, for the mental health care availability in Indiana is a kind of challenging again with 21 rural or particular rural counties lacking even one psychiatrist per 30,000 people in rural area of Indiana. And again, 53 of 92 of countries face a critical shortage or primarily healthcare provider with nearly of this area being in rural or particularly rural areas. I'm saying like a particular rural because of the non-metro, some of them are suburban. Here, as you know, maybe in Indiana, there is 6.7 million people living there. And between them are 2 million people living in rural areas. And that's why sometime in the report they called Indiana as a state, as a rural state. And based on the Purdue rural urban classification, 40 counties of Indiana are as a rural based on the methodology used in Purdue University. There is a kind of report showing why the importance of aging and newcomers who moving from urban to rural areas is important. Before I move to that, I just want to highlight that many of the factors affecting for the rural and I mean the aging who living in rural areas. Rural areas should be more important for the research recently, even for NIH and NIA, National Institute for Aging, because the food, healthy food come from rural areas and the best water qualities come from rural areas. Again, who take care of our community or like a border or our country, the US, are mostly living in the rural area. That's why we believe should be more attention for rural areas. And based on the report here, there is in almost 1 million in the 2040, there will be 1,600,000 aging in rural area of Indiana. And again, based on another report, it shows like for health and wellness need, it's just an example, just feeling that the depressed, there was in 2013 was 40%, in 2017 was 41%, and 2020 right now, in 2020 is 44%. And again, another report showing for the aging percent feeling the lonely or isolated. In 2013, it was 34%, again increased in 2017 for 35%, and in 2020 is 42%. That is make like more important of we should take care of our aging who living in rural areas. As a community quality of life and resilience, which is more the model we create with Professor Sergi from Regional Tech University and Rhonda Phillips. She also is my mentor for my NIH program. Here is the community quality of life model captures the dimensions that influence the subjective well-being and aging newcomer in rural areas. This is a model we designed it. Again, here is the model come from Professor Sergi's model who using the model as community quality of life for urban areas. We just adopted and changed some of the factors to use in rural areas, especially for rural area of Indiana. The first factor we have in the model is community service satisfaction indicators. The second one is community condition satisfaction indicators. The third one is satisfaction with life domain indicators, then subjective well-being indicators, and demographic specific indicators, which is almost as the resilience as a kind of ocean for all of these factors, but in not so deeply, just in this very small effect for the resilience. As a community satisfaction indicators, we have a 5 sub-team, which is healthcare service satisfaction, transportation satisfaction, housing service, social service, and government and non-profit service satisfaction. I just want to just save the time and just pass these sub-teams as we have a 5 factors for community service satisfaction indicators. Again, for community condition satisfaction indicators, we have a 4 type of the sub team, which is first one is neighborhood safety satisfaction. The second one is environmental quality satisfaction, community connectivity, and social isolation and support. For the satisfaction with life domain indicators, again, we have a 4 sub team. The first one is physical health satisfaction. Second one is mental health satisfaction, social well-being satisfaction, and work and leisure life satisfaction. For the subjective well-being, we have a 2 sub-team, is overall life satisfaction, and second one is a perceived quality of life, which I use for WHO, World Health Organization indicators for getting our data for overall life satisfaction and perceived quality of life. There is a 5 factors for the quality of life, which come from WHO, World Health Organization. For the demographic specific indicators, we have 2 sub-teams. The first one is migration history and adoption, and second one is age-related factors. As a building resilience, as a target community quality of life indicator for Indiana rural will be, we designed a model here. We will see in the next slide as well. We designed a model for using in rural area for Indiana. Maybe it's a question for everyone is why these indicators important. As I mentioned earlier, there is no centralized model for using in rural areas. That's why we believe is a kind of gap for rural area, especially in Indiana. That's why it directly impact the resilience in the rural areas and the focus of the population who are facing many of the problems. Since I mentioned earlier, they're moving from urban to non-metro area, and they will face a lot of problems, especially for transportation, and especially the most important is for healthcare. And the last one is provide a holistic view to see what should be done there in rural areas and what will be the next step. For that model, we use the 3 type of the factors. The first one is theoretical. It is satisfaction. I already show you in the last slide. There is the 5 factors as a satisfaction, as a methodology. Again, this come from Professor Sergi's model. We adopted and changed some of the factors to be used in rural areas. And the last one, evidence-based policies and the actionable recommendation to address as this kind of factors for the well-being among the aging newcomer in rural areas, and see what should be done in rural areas and what is the gap there and what will be the next step and what will be the trend in subject of the newcomers in rural areas. This is the final model. We designed it for the community quality of and resilience dynamics as starting from community quality of life and strength local engagement, pathway to rural and the sustainability, enhance adaptive capacity, community resilience, and you will see in the middle of the model, we have a community quality of life and community resilience. This is a kind of related publication and presentation we did during the almost last year right now, from last summer right now. We are working many of the project and the publication you can see in the left side, and the right side you will see a work and project I'm doing right now in Purdue University. The first one is iFront Door project, which is started with PCRRD, Purdue Center for Regional Development, and I'm teaching the course as an independent course in the Purdue John Martin Honors College, and also working with my students to collect the data from the communities, mostly in the rural and the small town around the Indiana. And the second one is community quality of life in action rural Indiana, which I'm working with Professor Lalani from Department of Nursing. This was my presentation, and thank you so much. I really appreciate. And I believe we should just stop sharing here. And tell me if is it time for question, or we are going to the question by end of our presentation, by end of the webinar. Thank
Well,
you.
thank you so much, Dr. Mousazadeh. I would like to do the questions at the end to give every presenter enough time to present. So I was asking attendees to put your messages in the chat. If you want to wait until the end, that's fine too. So we will have enough time for questions and panelists to answer after. So Dr. Mousazadeh, I want to thank you so much for presenting your insight and detailed research on rural Indiana. Who's very much appreciated. So
Thank
next
you so much.
up is Dr. Bednarik and Dr. Wilcox. Thank you. And don't forget to unmute your mics.
Yes, I just did. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining us for today's webinar. We will be presenting findings from the North Central Region Statistics Baseline Survey 2024 with a specific focus on community satisfaction and civic engagement among residents in Indiana. The NCR Stat Baseline Survey is a collaborative effort between the North Central Regional Center for Rural Development, the Southern Rural Development Center, and Auburn University. This open access data set was developed to better understand the conditions, challenges, and issues faced by rural and urban communities across the North Central region. The survey explores essential topics related to household, business, and community well-being. This 15-minute survey was conducted online using Qualtrics platform. We also used computer-assisted telephone interviews called CATI to reach the offline households, especially in remote rural areas. In total, the survey includes nearly 4,400 respondents across the region, including 419 in Indiana. And this map shows the distribution of respondents by state. You can see the 3 states with less number of respondents. Those are states that were more difficult to reach out to. It's South Dakota, North Dakota, and Nebraska. In terms of Indiana, the rural-urban split of respondents is 113 rural and 306 urban households. As you can see, the survey covers a broad range of topics. Some questions were carried over from the 2022 baseline survey, allowing us to track changes over time, while new questions helped capture additional insights. The green topics are new in the 2024 survey. It's recreation economy, moving and staying behavior, and food security support. Excuse me. In this presentation, we will focus on several questions included in the section quality of life, satisfaction, and well-being, and also questions included in the section civic engagements, especially the trust-related section in this trust-related questions. I also need to mention that we developed a bridge between baseline survey 2022 and 24 to be able to compare those two surveys and find out whether there are what questions are the same, similar, or were adjusted, or newly added, or they miss in 2024 survey. Now let's look at the life satisfaction trends in Indiana. All respondents were asked the question, all things considered, how satisfied are you with life as a whole nowadays? In rural and urban areas, satisfaction declined from 2022 to 2024, especially in rural areas. We can see the drop from 6.8 to 6.4. More interestingly, there is a difference in satisfaction level by gender. All women are less satisfied than men. It means that the urban men are more satisfied than urban women, and also rural men are more satisfied than rural women. Especially in 2024, there was a significant difference between urban men satisfaction and women and urban women satisfaction level. We asked about the satisfaction with the place of living. 68 respondents responded they were satisfied or very satisfied with the current residential location. And this satisfaction with the current place of living was similar between urban and rural respondents. So it's about, again, it's 68%. 41% of respondents reported that they do not want to move. And among those who didn't want to move, we can see that 1/3 of rural respondents want to move to a different rural areas. So those who want to move mainly to rural areas, which is very interesting results. So we see that most respondents want to move either to rural areas, or urban respondents want to relocate to rural areas as well. And only 11% of respondents want to move to I'm sorry, I need to move. Yes. And only 11% of respondents want to relocate to urban areas. So regarding the satisfaction with community amenities, we asked many questions about community amenities. I picked one because this specific community amenity, specifically access to medical care, is one that showed the most different levels of satisfaction and differences between rural and urban areas, and it kind of aligns with what Hossein said in his presentation about the healthcare. So we see that rural respondents were less satisfied with the medical care and access to medical care than urban respondents. What was interesting was the satisfaction among age categories. Older respondents were more satisfied with access to medical care. Between the respondents aged 65 to 74 years old were satisfied from 32% of them, and the least satisfied were respondents between 35 to 44 years old. And here is the list of other community amenities we asked about and the satisfaction with these amenities. So, for example, availability of internet, availability of financial services, and many others. We also asked about satisfaction with opportunities in the community. I picked the satisfaction with employment opportunities. Again, we can see a big difference between rural and urban satisfaction. Again, rural respondents were less satisfied with employment opportunities compared to urban respondents. Looking at gender differences, there is a clear gap between the satisfaction with employment opportunities between both urban and rural men and urban and rural women, when women were less satisfied with employment opportunities than men. Again, we asked about the satisfaction regarding more community opportunities, such as access to affordable housing, connections between people and community organizations, etc. And lastly, we included the loneliness to our presentation and to the section of life satisfaction, because loneliness is or feeling of loneliness can deeply affect well-being and life satisfaction. Looking at the differences between rural and urban, there are no big differences, and there are also not big differences between rural and urban women who feel always or often lonely. What is very interesting to see the perception of never feeling lonely. There is a big difference between never feeling lonely between both urban and rural men and rural and urban women. So about 30% of men never feel lonely, but around 16% of women, only this percentage of women never feels lonely. And I think that's it from my side, and I give the floor to Michael, and I will move the slides for you.
Thank you so much, Zuzana. I greatly appreciate it. I took some inspiration for the few slides that I have here from a little blog I wrote a couple of years ago based on some work that I did with the GOAT, Lori Garkovich from the University of Kentucky. Many of you probably know Lori, and she and I did some things focused on entrepreneurship and collaboration. So I threw that in there for some extracurricular reading if you wish to read that. If we go to the next slide, in that paper, or in that blog, I guess I should say, we looked at a paper that was written back in 1999, Community-Based Collaboration, Community Wellness Multiplied. It came out from the Chandler Center for Community Leadership. And it's a great paper. I use it all the time to talk about all the different ways that communities can collaborate or partner or so on. But one of the things that really struck me now that we're in 2025 is sort of the key components of being able to do any of this. And some of the things that they bring up are understanding how people's expertise and skill fit into the big picture, and that people can actually make significant contributions. If you guys think back to work that Bo did back in the day, looking at individuals and their assets, this understanding fits right into that. Belief in the community and the desire to produce the best possible services. All of us have worked in communities that doesn't believe in itself, if you will, and you have to have that. Recognition that people's talents and experiences and contributions matter. Diversity, acceptance that the diversity is an advantage to the community, and recognizing that diversity comes in a lot of different flavors, if you will. If you think about the diversity wheel and all the different elements in the diversity wheel, and all of that plays into really good decision decision-making and buy-in. And then lastly, knowledge that each resident and organization is important to the community. You need to have these basic tenets, if you will. This is the foundation of being able to successfully collaborate. Next is community linkages. So this paper goes through networking to cooperating to partnership to coalition building to collaboration, recognizing that networking starts with sharing of information, and if you go through this continuum, you end at the most complex, which is creating new systems, which is collaboration. I think we use these interchangeably, but this paper I think effectively argues that they, while they build on one another, they're not interchangeable, they're actually different. If we go to the next slide, and then we'll get to the data. This paper, which I really appreciate, talks about the purpose of each element. In this case, this is collaboration. It talks about the structure of collaboration. It talks about the process. And I threw this in here because of the first bullet on the process. Leadership is high, trust level is high, productivity is high. And that trust level being high has been, as all of us know, a real challenge. And so I do want to offer that I did not look at the 2022 data. I only looked at the 2024 data. Quite frankly, as a social scientist, I think the researchable question that we're all waiting to ask is, are our levels of trust different between 2024 and 2026 when the next NCRCRD baseline comes out? And we're all waiting to see what that answer is. But the answer for 2024, it comes in the next slide. And I started with trust in community members. We have three different sections. One's trust in community members, and we have trust in institutions. And then we look at some frequency measures in terms of civic engagement. But in terms of trust in community members, if you look at the blue and the purple, those are the the community that you trust these different community members. And so if you start from the left of the blue all the way to the purple, that gives you an idea of how highly trusted these community members are. And if there's lots of orange or that very dark gray to the left, those are less trusted. And of course, you can assign numbers to these and create an index, which would go from 1 to 5, which I'll talk about in a moment. So now everyone's scratching their head, where's the rural, urban, and suburban piece of this? You can see healthcare providers, educators, store workers, religious community, co-workers, and neighbors. If we go to the next slide, this is how it played out. Rural residents showed consistently, and again, this is for Indiana, but rural residents showed consistently higher levels of trust across all community member categories compared to both suburban and urban residents. The overall pattern showed a clear gradient of trust, the most trusting being rural, second urban or suburban, third being urban. There were some statistical significance or some differences between rural and urban in terms of neighbors and healthcare providers, and between rural and suburban in terms of faith-based. What maybe was the most interesting piece was the fact that when combining all the personal trust measures, the difference between rural, suburban, and urban became more pronounced and is significant at the 95% confidence level, with rural being significantly different from suburban and rural being significantly different from urban. I do also want to note really quickly that if you look at the rural and urban and rural and suburban, you've got neighbors and you've got faith-based. And so not surprisingly, our rural residents appear to have that social capital in a bonding form. But what we'll see here in a few minutes is that it kind of falls apart when it comes to the bridging. And it turns out that our urban residents perhaps are more poised or better poised to actually bridge in terms of social capital and get things done. Next slide, please. Really quickly, I have a 1 minute. This is trust in institutions, police, media, and government. Not surprisingly, as you look at it, most trusting of police, least trusting of local government and media. Boy, this is going to be a fun one to ask in 2026. Next slide. Unlike personal trust, institutional trust shows smaller differences between locations. The gradient was still there, but it wasn't very pronounced. The highest level of trust was observed for police. Urban residents had the highest level of trust in local news media, interestingly, and you can see the combination of the institutional trust measures, none of which were significantly different. Next slide, please. This is the last civic engagement, participation in religious organizations, fundraising, community groups, community service, and community problems. To the left is yes within the last 12 months. I did this recently. The orange is yes, but not within the last 12 months. And then no is the green. And you can see worked with others on community problems is quite green there, as well as active member and community groups, which can be very concerning and fundraising activities, which can be very concerning for the work that we do as community development practitioners out in the field. Next slide. Thank you, Susanna. And so the most common type of engagement were voluntary community service and faith-based participation. The least common type of engagement was working with others to solve community problems. The urban residents showed the highest recent participation. Suburban showed the highest lifetime or ever participated. And rural residents have the highest never participated rates. So that's very, very interesting and has some significant implications in terms of rural community development work that we do. Urban residents, and this is where that bridging capital, I believe, comes into play. Urban residents show higher participation in community problem solving, group membership, fundraising, suggesting more formalized civic engagement structures in urban settings. That's what's coming out of this data for Indiana. Next slide. If you want to download the data, here's the DOIs, and next slide. So we make sure that Esmeralda has all the time in the world, I think is just our thank you slide. So thank you very much, and can't wait to hear what Esmeralda has to say.
Thank you both, Dr. Bednarik and Dr. Wilcox, for that collaborative presentation and showing us all the data sets and all of that data for 2022 and 2024. And next up is Esmeralda Cruz.
Thank you so much for all the great information and for sort of setting the stage for us to talk about the immigrant population in the state of Indiana. So I'm actually going to be dividing this portion of the presentation into 4 parts. There's a lot to talk about, so I'm going to be focusing primarily on highlights, but we're going to start off with a recap of the immigrant population in the state. Then we're going to give a quick overview of the immigration system, and going to give a very quick overview of the summary of recent policy changes. We've been seeing a lot coming in through the news, and then wrapping it up with impact on local communities. So without further ado, the data that I'm going to be presenting here over the next few slides, it's from 2023, and it comes from the American Immigration Council. Again, I'm going to be focusing primarily on highlights. So in terms of the immigrant population in the state of Indiana, we are home to approximately 433,000 immigrants, which makes up roughly 6.3% of the population. When it comes to labor force, we have approximately 284,000 immigrants in the labor force, making approximately 8.1% of the labor force work population in the state. And talking about undocumented immigrants, we are home to approximately 122,400 undocumented immigrants. And just to make sure that we're all operating under the same definition, undocumented immigrants is an immigrant who came into this country without any inspection or any of the necessary paperwork. So roughly, in terms of undocumented immigrants, they make up about 28.7% of the population. When we compare that to the national level, nationally, it's about 23%. In terms of DACA eligible residents in the state, when this program was initiated, DACA, it was initiated back in 2012. We had up to almost 11,000 DACA eligible residents in the state. But as of March 31st of 2023, we have a little bit over 8,000 residents who actually have DACA status. So it's declined over the last few years, and there's a lot of reasons for that decline. One of those is the litigation, the ongoing litigation when it comes to DACA. So some people have lost trust and therefore have decided not to renew. In terms of refugees in the state, we are home to approximately 28,500 refugees. And temporary protected status holders, we're home to approximately 12,900. So you're going to hear me use a lot of acronyms. So here's just a quick overview of some of those acronyms that you're going to hear throughout the presentation. When you hear ICE, we're referring to Immigration Customs Enforcement. DACA is a deferred action for childhood arrivals. TPS is temporary protected status. Lawful permanent residents is lawful permanent resident, or green card holders is another way another term we can use to describe this part of the immigrant population. And then CBP is Customs and Border Protection. And the 287G program, I'll actually be elaborating more on that here in the next few slides. So now I'm going to take you all the way back to 1965. Again, I think it's important for us to set the stage to have a better understanding of the immigration system since we're talking about this specific population. So in 1965, President Johnson signed the Immigration and Nationality Act. And this is a huge piece of legislation, but one of the things it did, it eliminated race, creed, and nationality as a basis of admission to the US. So prior to 1965, a lot of the immigrants that had access to our immigration system in the United States were primarily from European countries as well as from Canada. And one of the things that we started to see is once this piece of legislation was passed, we started to see more immigrants coming in from other parts of the world, like, for example, Asia and Latin America. And you can see it on this chart with the different tones of brown throughout. Now, one of the big incentives for passing this piece of legislation is because if we look at this line chart, starting in about 1910, we started to see a steady decline in the number of immigrants that were coming in to the United States. And so once that piece of legislation was passed in 1965, by 1970, we start to see this steady increase, right? So we started to see more people coming in and populating the country. Okay, so now we're shifting gears a little bit into the admission categories when it comes to the immigration system. So you notice from this pie chart, roughly 69% of all of our immigrants have access to the immigration system thanks to the family-sponsored visas that are available. Approximately 14% have employment-based immigrants, and roughly 8% are refugees. Approximately 4% have diversity, are benefiting because of the diversity visa program. And then the final 6%, it's a mix of a lot of different types of visas, including entrepreneurship, student visas, tourist visas. I mean, there's just a lot to cover, but that is a very small portion, making about 6%. Now, again, because from this pie chart, we can see that roughly 69% are family sponsored. I want to focus on this specific category in the next couple of slides. So when it comes to family-sponsored visas, we have two main types. And the first one is what we call the immediate relative immigrant visa. And you see the word unlimited here in parentheses. And that's because there's not a set quota in terms of how many applications can be processed per year. And now, in order to benefit from this type of family visa, you have to have a specific family tie to a US citizen. And those family ties include the spouse of a US citizen, a unmarried child under the age of 21 of a US citizen, an orphan either adopted abroad, as well as adopted here in the United States by a US citizen, and finally, the parent of a US citizen, given that they are at least 21 years of age. So that's the first type, the immediate relative immigrant visas. The second type is what we call the family preference immigrant visas. And here you see the word limited. That's because there's a set quota in terms of the number of applications that can be processed per year. In order to be eligible for this type of family immigrant visa, you have to have a family tie with either a US citizen or a lawful permanent resident. And there's four main categories. The first category are unmarried sons and daughters of US citizens and their minor children. And the number that you see in parentheses, this is how many applications can be processed per year per category. So in this case, it's 23,400. The second type is the spouses and minor children, which make up roughly 77% of all of these cases. And then the difference of that is the unmarried sons and daughters of lawful permanent residents. The third category is married sons and daughters of US citizens and their spouses and minor children. And then the fourth is brothers and sisters of US citizens and their spouses and minor children. One of the other things, I'll go back to the F2 category, which again are the spouses and minor children. If you notice, the number in parentheses for that one is 114,200. This number is going to be important here in the next slide, which is why I wanted to highlight that. So again, just to note that there are certain family ties that do not allow for a family member to be sponsored, and that may include people like grandparents, aunts, uncles, in-laws, cousins, etc. So I'm going to ask you all to please just take a few seconds in the chat and answer the following question. What is the average waiting time for immigrants in the family preference? And that was the latter category, so the second one that I presented, to receive their documentation after being petitioned. So if you think it's 0 to 5 years, just enter a 1 in the chat. If you think it's 6 to 10 years, enter a 2. If you think it's 11 to 15 years, enter a 3. 16 to 20 years, enter a 4. And if you think it's 21 years plus, please go ahead and enter a 5. And I'm just going to take a quick look at the chat. I want to see what people are saying. I see a lot of 2s coming through, 1, 5, a 1. Thank you so much for those of you that are taking the time to put this in, a 3, a 4. Thank you. Because of time, I'm going to go ahead and move on. So this question, it depends on what country. On the country where this person lives. So I'm going to focus right now on the country of Mexico, but of course you're welcome to look at the whole table. And the reason why I'm focusing on Mexico is because it's the one that has the most backlog. So for example, if we look at the F1 category, which again included the unmarried sons and daughters of US citizens, the applications that are being processed right now were submitted on November 22nd, 2004. So if you answered with a 5 in the chat, you are accurate for this country. And if you look just down, you'll see that the F2A category across the board is the one that doesn't have such a big backlog. The backlog here is somewhere between 3 to 4 years. But if you remember to that number in terms of the quota was a lot higher. And that's one of the reasons why the backlog is not as great as it is for some of the other categories. Now, if we look, for example, at the Philippines also has quite a backlog. For most of these categories for the Philippines, the wait time is between 13 to 22 years. And then for all the other countries, it's between 9 to 18 years, again, depending on the category and depending on the country. So, you know, for some of us, we may have heard the term broken immigration system. And two of the big reasons why sometimes that term is used is because some people don't have access to our immigration system. And then in other instances, the wait time it's just very long. Now, you may be wondering about the first family preference categories that we talked about. The wait time for the first one, which included the spouse and the children and the parent or the children adopted, that one the wait time is not as long. Roughly 80% of the cases, they can be processed within about, I think it was about 20 months. So it's a lot, shorter than the second type. Now, when we look at the foreign-born population, roughly 49% of all immigrants in this country, and this is data at the national level, not at the state level, but roughly 49% of all of the immigrant population are naturalized citizens, whether they were born here or became naturalized citizens after a few years. Roughly 24% are lawful permanent residents. Roughly 4% are temporary lawful residents. And then again, I kind of shared this with you earlier on, roughly 23% are undocumented. So this is a table that was put together by a colleague of mine from the Immigrant Connection. He was just trying to highlight what are some of the additional barriers that maybe are not as huge, but they're still barriers that can impede an immigrant from seeking either moving forward with an immigration status or gaining more permanent legal status. Now, because of time, I'm going to go ahead and share with you some of the recent policy changes that we've seen. I'm only going to talk about 15. Unfortunately, this does not include all of them, but it does include quite a bit of those that are that we're seeing quite a bit of on the news right now. So as of January of this year, we saw the news that the border was going to be closed. And here we see the border in the south, which is the U.S.-Mexico border, but that's also true with the U.S.-Canada border. Asylum ban was placed immediately as of January 21st. Prior to this year, there was a phone app that was used. It was called the CBP-1, and this was for anybody that was seeking an asylum appointment. That application has now been disabled. So people are no longer able to make any asylum-based appointments. We also see the end of the Cuban, Haitian, Nicaraguan, and Venezuelan parole program. And I want to give you the date for this one. This was actually terminated. We saw the announcement coming through on March 25th, but it became effective. It's going to become effective here on the 24th of this month, so pretty soon. We also saw the termination of the 2023 Venezuelan TPS. Again, that's temporary protected status designation. So the one for 2023, it was terminated on April 7th. And then the one that was passed in 2021, that one's going to be terminated effective on September 10th of 2025. We've also seen on the news quite a bit on international student visas being revoked. The most recent report that I've seen is roughly 300, and that's based on reportings from universities in the country. The 287G program is going to be expanded. And for example, here in the state of Indiana, we have already seen an executive order signed by our governor wanting to see more of a collaboration between state and local enforcement with our immigration officers. So just to give you an idea, each state has a different number of immigration officers, and the number of immigration officers is based on the population of the state. So for example, in the state of Indiana, we have 9 immigration officers. So with the state that has 92 counties, that's roughly 10 counties being covered by every immigration officer. And that's why the 287G is huge. It's because of the implications, because now you have local law enforcement and state partners that can be assisting immigration officers with some of their duties and responsibilities. We also earlier this year saw the announcement of the limit birthright citizenship. That has already been blocked by the court in its ongoing litigation. So we just kind of have to keep an eye out on what happens with that in the courts. The alien registration requirement, that was a more recent announcement, and it became effective as of April 11th of this year. So essentially, what's happened is USCIS, if you go to the USCIS website, there's now a 5-step process for aliens who meet 2 guidelines to have to register. And that includes any immigrant who is in this country for more than 30 days, that's important, more than 30 days, who was not fingerprinted at the point of entry. So that includes immigrants that are undocumented, but it can also include immigrants that came in with a tourist visa that are going to be staying for more than 30 days and who were not fingerprinted at the port of entry. Recently, we also saw the announcement of the data sharing agreement between the IRS and ICE. So if you look at the previous slides, most of our undocumented immigrants are filing taxes. And so one of the things that's being discussed right now is, are we going to see an impact in the filing of taxes due to this agreement? There's very little that we know about the agreement. The only thing that we know right now is that IRS has agreed to release information related to immigrants that have a criminal background, but we don't know the specifics as to, does that include misdemeanors? Is it just is it felonies? What does that really look like? How many immigrants potentially could be impacted? These are still things that we're still waiting for. The announcements of mass deportations, and we've seen it on the media quite a bit. One of the ways that these mass deportations are taking place is that there's something now called expedited removal, and it's been expanded. So prior to 2025, we saw expedited removal when it came to areas that were within 100 miles of the border. So really that was the point of focus, 100 miles from the border, and with immigrants who had been or who had entered the country within the last 2 weeks. But that's no longer the case. Now, immigration officers are seeking immigrants throughout the country. So that 100 miles stipulation is no longer in place, and the length of time that they've been in this country is no longer in place. We also saw the sensitive locations memo rescinded. So prior to this being the case, immigrants could be in schools and medical facilities and churches, among many other places. Immigration officers were not allowed to enter into those premises but that's no longer the case. The catch and release has also been removed. So we've heard from ICE that the focus is to remove immigrants that are considered a threat or a danger to this country, meaning they have some sort of criminal history. And so if in the past, if they were to detain somebody and then they would interview them or check their criminal history to see if they had anything, if they didn't, they could be released. But that's no longer the case. So now, if you were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and if you're detained, basically the chances of you being released if you don't have a criminal history are essentially none, is what we're being told. So using the chat again, I want to invite everybody to, after just getting this brief recap of recent immigration changes, what do you think that those changes mean in terms of our local communities? What sort of impact? And I'm going to go through some of these, but I just kind of want to get a sense if any of you have seen anything, within your own local communities in terms of what are the implications of these policy changes. Some of the things that we've become aware about is when it comes to different sectors, including like agriculture, construction, hospitality, we've seen a reported decrease in people showing up. So there's labor shortages specific to these areas. There's also a decrease in the number of immigrants attending their immigration appointments for fear of detention and deportation. We've also seen reports from small businesses and decrease in the number of consumer visits. So they have noticed that the number of people coming into their stores or their restaurants by the immigrant community has decreased. Some schools have experienced a decrease in school attendance, and this varies heavily from school to school. We've also heard from schools that they're being more careful in terms of the type of events that they host and how they promote these events for fear of putting, this part of their population in any sort of danger. We have also seen and heard from some of the schools that a few families have decided to leave the country. And this can include family members with legal status, because one of the things we need to remember is that when it comes to the immigrant population, some of our families are what we call mixed status families, meaning they may, within the same nucleus of a family, we may have somebody that's undocumented, somebody that's a US citizen, and somebody that has some other type of more temporary legal status. We have also seen increased responsibility for family members with legal status. So for example, if somebody in the family has a driver's license, they may be taking more of that responsibility or maybe working more hours. If they have family members that either don't have a driver's license or are not able to work due to a lack of work authorization. So these are just some of the ones that we've seen come through. I'm looking at the chat. I don't think, but feel free to share if you've noticed any specific impacts within your local communities. You're welcome to share those through the chat. And finally, just to wrap up, I just want to share some resources that may be of use. When it comes to immigration cases, there's a few legal clinics or agencies, organizations that are able to provide assistance when it comes to immigration cases, as well as if you're interested in more immigration information, here are some resources that you may want to look into. And that's it for my portion of the presentation. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Esmeralda. All three presentations were amazing and provided so much insight. And I think that your presentation on immigration is something very useful for all states, and for whatever state the attendees are in. So really appreciate you being here and presenting that. Thank you. I started to put some of the comments and answers into the chat. So if any of you are able to click open your chat and look, we had comments. Thank you, Cornell, for your comments to Dr. Mousazadeh. He answered you on that. There was a question from Rick Orton to Dr. Bednarek, and she answered very specifically with the percentages. Thank you so much, Susanna, for that. I don't know, maybe we can go over what these are. And if anybody has any other messages or questions, I'll quickly go through them. So Cornell had mentioned this is such a great project for Hossein. I've learned from my research that is good addition to measure well-being in relation to social capital because of the extent to which social capital influence our ability to improve well-being in relation ability to improve well-being, quality of life. She also said, very good presentation. It just shows that we need to always assess how lonely people feel, as that does impact our sense of quality of life in the end. And he commented, thank you, dear Cornell. I agree completely that assessing feelings of loneliness is crucial when looking at community well-being. So thank you guys for the commentary on that. Rick Orton asked Dr. Bednarik, I believe I heard that your survey was administered via computer. Can you tell us the % of age categories that participated in the surveys? Also, were there a different set of participants participating in 2022 versus 2024? I should be asking you guys to and read off your answer. Your answer is very detailed. Susanna, I don't know if you want to go through what you had written to him real quick.
Yes, I think it's important because we use the general age distribution across the US. So we defined 3 age quotas for the 2024 baseline survey. We have 3 age categories. So the first is 18 to 44, and we wanted to have between 35 and 41% of participants in this age category. The second category was 45 to 64 years old, and there we wanted between 32% to 38%. And the last category was 65 plus, with the minimum of 24% of participants. So we wanted to have as even as possible the categories to cover all different life stages. And as for the second part of the question, unfortunately, no, it was not possible to have the same participants in 2024 that were in 2022. We used, or the Qualtrics company that collected the data for us asked different households that were included in the online data set, but they were different in those 2 surveys.
Thank you. Thank you for going through that answer. I would not have been able to say it like that. Thank you. Cornell Hart commented to Esmeralda, this date is so important. This data, she meant to say, is so important, Esmeralda, and you should consider sharing it some way or the other via LinkedIn too. Any comments or ideas on that?
Yes, I think so there's aspects of the presentation that it's ongoing, right? We're sort of in the midst of everything. So I think that's one of the fears of sort of putting this type of information, is that it could become very quickly outdated because there's just so many changes coming up. But if there's any specific groups that you think would benefit or would be interested in receiving this information, please don't hesitate to reach out to me via email, and we can definitely coordinate. We just want to make sure that they are getting the most up-to-date information as possible.
Thank you. And if you don't have Esmeralda's email, you can definitely reach out to admin@cdsociety.org and individually, and I can definitely connect you with her or any of the panelists on today. Dan Call had a message for Dr. Wilcox. Is there any organization that you are aware of that is tracking levels of public trust? It would be great to have a national database similar to what the Social Capital Atlas did, assessing ongoing levels of trust in local governments. I see you did put a response. You want to put your response live on the comments?
Sure.
Michael?
I wanted to mention and remind everyone that these questions were asked not only in the North Central region for every state, but in every state in the South and every state in the Northeast. And that data is publicly available through Purdue, through NCRCRD. So all those trust questions, civic engagement questions are there. It'll soon be available for the West as well. So very soon we'll have a national data set state by state. It doesn't have the granularity of county by county as of yet, but that data is publicly available through the NCR Stat website at Purdue University. I wanted to mention that our civic engagement questions were inspired by Adler and Goggin, an article that they wrote in 2005, and so that gave us the inspiration to ask the questions that we did. And not only are the survey instruments available, but of course all the data is publicly available as well for download. But I love Dan's question, and I haven't done an environmental scan yet, but plan to see where the data lies and make sure the data continues to be available if it is available, which has been a challenge for some of the data sets that we commonly use. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer. I see Amber, your hand is raised. For anybody trying to raise your hand, please text your question in the chat so that we can move through this pretty quickly. If you could go to the chat and text your question. Thank you. Esmeralda, do you see Jennifer Stefancic? I hope you said your last name correctly. Stefancic, she gave an update. Did you read that? Do you want to elaborate on that? Obviously, you have more experience with this than I.
Yes, I did pull up the web link that she posted. It just kind of goes through one of the things we're talking about was with the Haitian, Nicaraguan, Venezuelan, Cuban parole program. And that's the thing too that's sort of tricky about this conversation is that a lot of these cases still are pending in litigation in the court. So even though announcements have been made, some of them have this sort of wait period. And then in some cases, there has been some litigation or some lawsuits put in place.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you, Dan, for your comment about, the importance of these presentations. I'm going to put, I think you might have addressed this, Michael, but I'm just going to put this answer that you gave. Because nobody's seeing this, but all of us on the panelist side, because there's a link on there. If anybody wants that link, you're welcome. What else is there? Oh, Susanna, you put the links to the baseline survey. Can you click everyone and put those in the chat? Make it much easier.
We don't have that option.
Oh, you don't? Okay. All right.
Nope.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we don't have that option. I
Sorry.
would love to do that.
Okay, so I will do it. No problem. Give me 1 second, everyone. I'm hoping that this information is useful. I'm sure it is. Okay. I hope I did that right. Okay, so those are the links for the baseline survey. Is that good? Did I copy this multiple times? I'm so sorry. No, it's good. Does that look good?
It looks similar, but they are three different, or they are identical, but those are three regional surveys.
Okay.
Northeast region, southern region, and of course, north central region. And the western region is coming up probably in spring or during summer. So we will have the national database with the questions that I mentioned during the presentation and Michael did as well. So, for example, in terms of trust, there are the same questions we asked across the nation, across the three regions, and then it will be also in the Western region survey. So then we can compare the trust-related questions between the regions and see whether there are any differences or similarities.
Thank you for providing that. Anybody else, any attendees with any additional questions? I think that I found most of the questions or all the questions. Do any of the panelists see any to us that I missed? I think it's all there. Any additional questions from attendees? If you have any additional ones in the next couple minutes, please enter it by text in the chat. I'm going to give last words to our panelists. Dr. Mousazadeh, do you have any last words?
Yeah, I want to thank you so much again. I appreciate for Community Development Society to giving opportunity for the Purdue researcher with my colleague here to present our recent data and result from our research. And a special thank to you, Tammy. Thank you so much for helping us and organize the webinar. I hope we can continue with NCCRD because they have, or I believe they can talk about that more, but they have a monthly webinars, and maybe in the future we can just work again and the new webinar with the new result from the new project. And want to say thank you to Tanner. He's not here. He helped a lot to organize email and connect with Susanna, with Michael, with Mrs. Cruz, and everyone to make sure we can like have the webinar today in April 21st. I want to say, Tanner, thank you, but he's not here. Just pass my thank you to Tanner. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, and I will let Dr. Tanner Knorr know. Recent doctor.
Oh, really?
Congratulations to him. Yeah,
Great.
I will definitely let him know. So for all of you attending, he coordinated this. He is the chair of the webinar and educational training subcommittee. So special thanks to Tanner. Susanna, do you have any last words to the attendees? And you're muted, so just unmute your mic, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this webinar. It was a real pleasure to be able to present our first results from the survey that we conducted last year, and specifically the questions related to life satisfaction and trust and community engagement and civic engagement are very important and interesting for community and regional development. And I also would like to use this opportunity to invite everyone to the next, not next, but to the webinar hosted by NCRCRD on May that will be about again this survey, the baseline survey, because it will be our inauguration webinar along with Dr. John Green from the Southern Regional Center, who participated in the development of the survey. And I will put the link to the chat and ask for, again, copying it to the chat for everyone. If anyone is interested, please register for the webinar in May. Thank you.
And if they can't register now using the link, so I'm gonna have to give everybody the link because you just sent it to me. I'm gonna send it right now. Thank you for that. And thank you, Sugnam Moon. I just put a comment from South Korea. Thank you for attending. He was very thankful for the presentations today. I put it for everybody to see. Thank you. How can people go and register on NCRCRD? Is it on the website? Is it easy to navigate to the webinars?
Yes, I put the registration link to the chat, but I also can add the link to NCRCRD webinars, where people can register directly for the webinar. So,
And they can, because I know for me, I get the emails with the webinar, so they can register to receive
yes,
that. Okay.
yes.
Oh, yeah.
So if you can forward the invitation to the webinar, that would be great as well. But for those who do not receive this invitation, then here is the link.
Thank you. And thank you, Shelley. Shelley Server put the link in too. Thank you so much. Dr. Wilcox, you have any last words?
Yeah, people are going to laugh, I guess, when I say this, but the bumper sticker says think globally and act locally. And I think we need to take that to heart right now in this time of global uncertainty. I think it's really important that in order to empower or continue to empower civic engagement, we can't lose that notion that we need to believe in ourselves. We need to recognize that we can make a difference, that our own diversity is very, very important, and we need to lend our personal diversity to the diversity of the groups that we're working with. We need to make sure that we're applying knowledge, and we need to be sure that we understand the role that we can play locally as we act, but I do think that we need to be thinking globally, and that's why I appreciate Community Development Society, the International Association of Community Development, and closer to home, the National Association of Community Development Extension Professionals, NACDEP. It's so important that we as community development professionals work together from across the globe, whether you're in South Africa, South Korea, or in West Lafayette, Indiana. It's so important that we continue to come together, convene, and share ideas and thoughts and knowledge, and lift each other up. So I appreciated the opportunity to work with my Purdue colleagues today and present some things we're working on here out in the cornfields and soybean fields of Indiana.
Thank you so much. And Esmeralda Cruz, do you have any last words for our attendees?
I think Michael said it very well. So thank you, Michael, for stating that so properly. And outside of that, just thank you for creating the space and the opportunity for us to have this conversation. Thank you to everybody for giving of their time to be a part of today.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody who attended. I will be sending a copy of the recorded transcript soon, within a few days. So I really want to thank you, and please stay tuned for more webinars, and please check out the cdsociety.org website on information about our upcoming annual conference. I hope everybody has a nice day, evening, and we hope to see you all soon. Thank you.